What is the purpose? Well, I want to be a $10 million company. And I've had friends that ran companies where this dream turned into a nightmare. You're trying to be all things to all people, and next thing you know, you get stuck. We started to get feedback from the market that it was harder to grow our revenue. So we needed to pivot really from focusing on people decisions to really looking at
Scaling smart, scaling fast, scaling free. Herb Cogliano, a CEO coach and scaling up practitioner, is on a mission to catalyze leadership breakthroughs, enabling entrepreneurs to grow businesses that generate more cash, more freedom, and more impact.
In fact, actually, let's go there. Vision, mission.
I'm not against any of those words, but in the scaling up terminology, represents your entire one-page strategic plan. Traction can serve smaller companies very well, and that will get you so far.
One of the things I've got to throw out there first to make sure we clarify, because some people might be like, what's a scaling up coach? Can you clarify what that is for everyone?
Yeah, scaling up is a growth methodology, and it came from a book written by Verne Harnish back in early 2000. And it was a book that really put together all the important components for scaling small mid-market companies. Many of us went to school. We took a class on accounting and marketing and finance. But this book put all of it together in one place. And it made it very easy to understand. And we created a bunch of simple one-page tools to help you use it. And it was a game changer for me in my entrepreneurial journey.
And on that, I'm actually curious if you'd share a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and what ultimately led you down that path where scaling up became such an important piece of it.
Yeah, I feel truly blessed. I grew up in a family business, second generation. My mother and father were in the employment industry, so we spent our lives helping people get jobs. And during that journey, we learned a lot of lessons because we would have to work during summers and when we graduated on temporary assignment jobs, knowing what it was like to be out there with the clients and working with colleagues. We then grew to a certain level, graduated college, started working in the company, and we started to feel some of the pressure that longer-term business owners feel. Your business starts to get commoditized. It's mature in the markets that you serve. You feel pricing pressure. And you're trying to be all things to all people. And next thing you know, you feel it in your sales, in your profitability, and you get stuck. And you're trying to find this ceiling of complexity and break through it. And Michael, it's one of the biggest reasons why companies don't get over 10 million or more, because they hit a ceiling of complexity. They're smart, they're hardworking, but they've just never been at that next level. And the complexity keeps them stuck at the current level. And scaling up methods and tools helped me break through that level of complexity.
And I'm curious with that, like those limits, can you maybe go into a little more detail about what some of those limits are?
Yeah, I'll give you a great example. So we're in the staffing industry. It was highly competitive, but there was a lot of turnover. So when you're trying to scale a company where the average tenure in your industry is 2 years or less, it's really hard to do. And so one of the things I did in the beginning was we had core values, but they were unwritten and they weren't really clear. So we needed to uncover the real core values that made our company a great company. And then we had to identify a purpose. Why were we all here? Was it just about money, or really was it about helping people find meaningful employment? I tell you this story because what ultimately helped us change the turnover to become a best places to work is that once we knew our values and once we had a compelling purpose, we could now hire, onboard, develop and recognize like-minded people to that mission. And when you get that group of people working together on something truly meaningful, great things happen. And it did.
If you like what you're seeing and you want to see more, be sure to click on the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click on the bell. It lets YouTube know you want to support the This Is the Way podcast, and it helps spread the word, and we greatly appreciate it. And now, back to the episode. I mean, everything you're saying to me is the culture. How would you say that if someone gets to that point and they realize that their culture of where they think they should be is very far from where they are actually, like, how would you bridge that gap? Because I've seen this so often where the founder or the executives know where at least on paper, like, this is all culture, but it's so far from reality. And there's such a struggle pulling people into this new culture.
Yeah. Great question, Artin. I find that in here, I think this is good news. The majority of people that I'm working with are not a startup. These are people who have been in business 5, 10, 20 years. So the good news is it's never too late to start. But what you need to do is have somebody help you clarify the unwritten values, help you uncover a truly meaningful purpose, and then give you the playbook, the systems for using it in your job advertisement, your interviewing, your screening, your hiring practices, your onboarding, and your professional development and recognition. Once somebody taught me the systems to implement the values once they were uncovered, then it became part of my business operating model. And that's what we need to do.
Yeah. When, for me, when I've done these type of exercises and going from, values to eventually boil it down or boil it up to the mission and the purpose, I've always gravitated towards something that's more emotionally driven rather than logic. Because I feel like people can really attach to something that they can emotionally feel versus some logical mission. Yeah. I'm just curious where you stand on that, and which way do you kind of work towards or advise clients to go towards?
This is such a great question, because one of the toughest things that we do is help an owner uncover their purpose. And a lot of owners, when I begin speaking with them, me included, quite frankly, in the beginning, what is the purpose? Well, I want to be a $10 million company. And then I want to be, it's funny, it's 1 and 2. I want to be 10 million if I'm not. And then the next one they tell me is I want to be 100 million. Those are the two I hear consistently. Yeah. And then I said, why? Maybe money, maybe a financial independence, whatever. Those are not bad things. But then I asked them a question. If I'm your employee, how much does that motivate me for you to have a $100 million company? And there's not a high level of motivation in that. And I'm, again, not saying it's a bad thing, but the answer, and you touched on it, is that if I can ask you about what you do and give you a series of questions that ultimately uncovers why is that important and what difference does that make in the world, and I can finally get you to a point to give me a purpose that you can emotionally connect to. And there's this moment in working with a business owner. Some owners, I can do it in the first afternoon. Some owners, it may take a year or longer. But Michael and Artin, you'll see emotion on the owner's face when they finally get it. Like they're emotionally, you feel this energy aura coming off them. and there's nothing more beautiful. And I'll give you an example. Working in the last year and a half with a company that sells natural stone. I mean, their environment is dirty, it's dusty, they're cutting stone all day long. And I said, what's your purpose? Well, we want to be the greatest stone company in the world. And I said, wow, that sounds like that's off your brochure. Very marketing. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, what do you really want to do? And then they started talking. I said, tell me about your customers, the letters you've read, the people you spoke to that were the most happiest. And then they started telling me stories, and I could see their eyes light up. You know what they ultimately came out with?
What?
Every project they finish, they take amazing photos of these beautiful projects, homes, backyards with veneer on the house, stone, outdoor fireplaces, things like that. And the owner and the CEO said to me, he goes, you know what our real purpose is? Bringing people together. When I look at our work and I see a family sitting outside with their wife and children around the fire pit, making s'mores, having amazing memories and conversations, I just want to do that over and over and over. And from that, they created this amazing, big, hairy, audacious goal, the Jim Collins BHAG. They do this for several thousand people a year right now, and they're very successful. They want to do it in the next 10 years or less, 20,000 projects a year.
Wow.
Now look at the ripple effect from the contractor to the actual families to the communities. They do community work and residential work. That impact is exponential. But now that they've emotionally connected to it, their ownership has gone up 1,000% in their mind, in their people support behind it. That's the difference.
That's amazing. I mean, even as you share that example, like for me, all of a sudden I'm like, I could get behind that. Like not thinking that I had any particular interest, in that field that connects me to it. And that's the power, I think, of something like that. So I love it. And then I assume from there, and in fact, actually, I'm curious on this because Artin had mentioned the values in the backup. Do you usually start with the vision, mission, and go to our values, or do you go from values back the other way?
I think it depends, honestly, actually on the company. Like I'll meet one company, Michael, and their values are very good. They've been doing work like this before, and they're dealing with cash. And I need to go in and deal with their cash situation first. Maybe their sales are off, values are good, but their sales are declining, and we got to figure out a pivot. So answer is no, not always first, but probability, the majority is I begin with a lot of them there first.
Yeah. Gotcha. And then the idea of lining the others up to it so that it supports whatever that overall vision or mission is. In fact, actually, let's go there. Vision, mission. People often talk about these, and sometimes it feels like they use them interchangeably. How do you approach that?
Yeah. So I'm not against any of those words, but in the scaling up terminology, a vision represents your entire one-page strategic plan. From your values to your purpose to your BHAG, all the way down to your 90-day go-to-market execution. We don't use mission. We use purpose versus mission. Only because we think mission sounds more like a military operation, and not that that's a bad thing, but we believe with the company, we want to use the word purpose because it has more emotional connection in engagement with that word.
I actually wish more people used it that way because I think it's so much easier to actually understand exactly what it is in that case. And that's why I think people always get mixed up and confused between mission and vision and everything. Yeah, there. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more because you were talking about, some of the challenges. And one of those that you mentioned, which I can absolutely see is that individual who has a company and they've had that company for so many years. And, for them, oftentimes, sometimes it's about survival, but then as they get big enough, they hit this point now where it's like, okay, I want to continue to grow, but they've hit that ceiling.
Mhm.
Oftentimes I would assume that ceiling is them though, because so much of the culture, everything else is about their own ability to transfer what they envision or want. Sometimes people aren't even clear on that. They're still just moving forward each and every day. But aside from that piece, because obviously you said that's a core element to be able to work through, what else fits into this sort of scaling up methodology?
Well, let me continue the original story because it may answer, and if not,
Sorry,
press
perfect.
me on it, and I'll come back to it. So we dealt with the people issue, which was culture first.
Yeah.
Culture's going good. People are happy. They're staying longer. Next thing you know, we started to get feedback from the market that it was harder to grow our revenue. We had great people, but there were so many other competitors, and we were landlocked. I would say we were a regional player, not a national at the time. And we'd been there for decades. We were around 54 years. So we hunted in that market, as you can imagine, for quite a long time. So when you have more people coming into a market and the market is kind of confined, you're going to have a hard time growing sales, scaling at that point. So we needed to pivot really from focusing on people decisions to really looking at our strategy. And our strategy was not working. Revenue was not growing year over year the way we wanted, and margins were being compressed. Why do I tell you that? Because as an owner, when you're used to serving a market and going to market a certain way, it's hard to get out of your own way. I had never been a national company selling in national markets before. How do you do that? If you've never done it, how do you do it? So my father built an extremely strong full service staffing company, office, industrial, manufacturing, engineering. We did it all in your backyard. What we needed to do was pivot and become a pure play niche IT contract staffing firm. And that was a major switch in our culture and our strategy, but that was another ceiling that we were hitting. If you've never been there before, a CEO has to have an ability with his leadership team to always be reinventing themselves, to be self-aware of what you don't know, but have the tenacity, the initiative to want to learn something that you have no clue about. And that's hard for people when you're at the top.
Yeah.
So we went through this learning curve of completely transitioning from a full service to a niche and opening up locations throughout the country. And then ultimately we went international and opened up in Canada. And that was a whole other learning curve for me. Currency, employment law, you name it. But it's always about being able to reinvent yourself. But that was the second level of complexity that we hit.
So thinking in those terms now, for you at this point, your business, you is a global business, you could argue, like what you just described. And to get to that point, what like specific challenges, like when you mentioned that, I know you were saying that when you go global, there are certain rules and things like that, but that all sounds, when you say it, like, okay, but maybe this isn't an age of ChatGPT. It's like, well, there are certain ways you just start stepping through those. You're going to learn about them. What is it that the scaling up model solved for you in that scenario that that you wouldn't have figured out by kind of just pushing through the business?
We use a tool called the Rockefeller Habits Checklist. And those are 10 habits that John D. Rockefeller used in scaling up Standard Oil, which is today ExxonMobil, back in his day, which was truly amazing. But they're habits of execution. And if you want everybody to be on the same page using the same playbook, scale, I can have great strategy, but if I can't execute it and do it at scale, it's not going to work.
Okay.
So we were smart. Our leaders and our people were hardworking, but we had to put in repeatable, documented operating processes that we could manage and scale with. That was an important thing. We were doing it informally, Michael, but when you're a smaller mid-market company and your people are tenured, the leadership was tenured, we keep all that up in our head. And we don't like really documenting and happen to follow processes. We're entrepreneurs and we like to go by the seat of our pants. So that was important. One other big lesson though, Michael, we learned on that national global journey. When you have offices in your backyard, you don't rely on independent leaders as much because you're always in your home market where things are happening. So when we were in Cleveland, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Colorado, New York, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Hampshire, we had to hire strong, independent, autonomous leaders that knew how to build their own markets. And I got to tell you, we went through a tremendous learning curve trying to figure that out.
I can only imagine, as you even mentioned some of these things and just thinking about the barriers that people go through, it's like, the whole flying at the seat of your pants is often how some of these businesses are grown in the first place, because, it's somebody who almost doesn't know good enough to push past the things that other people are saying, oh no, I'll fail if I do that, but they still push past it. They get far enough along. And then now at this point, okay, the business is going a little bit better. But to your point, then they've often built this business that's so much around them. And that doesn't scale well, as you said, as you start thinking about other offices, they gotta be willing to let go. They gotta therefore build the processes that are going to allow it to happen, hire the great people, which at that point, a lot of these people who do it in these smaller markets, not to say they maybe don't hire levels of management, but there's still this level of oversight, whereas now you're hiring, in essence, mini CEOs, what you had grown into in these other areas, which, it's something that's hard to train for until you're doing it. And so I could see now as you talk about scaling up. So for you with that, there is the other big issue that a lot of businesses face. And I'm not sure if yours did or not, but when people are starting to do that, then comes in the whole question about money to do that though, because sometimes the vision starts to get so big that now they got to figure out how to fund the vision. Like, how does scaling up, or does it have a specific approach to that?
I believe in opportunity cash. It's one thing to have a business that just you can keep the lights on and make payroll. Yeah. But we like to be in businesses that have great growth prospects and very strong operating gross margins. Because if we run the business correctly, the operating profits you can generate from that type of business model will help you self-fund the growth that you want. One of the startups we did in adult education was a great business, but it allowed us to do 90% of it self-funded. Wow. And it was growing quick, but we had a good system, good people, and that really spurred our growth. And so we work with leaders on what type of business model do you have? What type of margins and bottom line? I teach, by the way, the Global Scaling Up Masters Business class. Okay. And I had an owner in my class, and he was in an industry that was a commodities industry. I forget the industry, but his profit margin, operating bottom line, was 2%. Oh, that's a tough business. Wow. And he'd been in it for years, and he was very good at what he did. And he said, you know what? I'm going to open a new company, complementary, but I have an idea, and the class has really kind of made me think. I said, great, I'd love to hear about it. Tell me more. He showed me. And I said, but show me what operating profit can you get? He goes, 7%. Now, the beauty is I congratulated him because I said, good, you're thinking 3x better.
Yeah.
I said, but why not 20%?
Yeah.
And so the light bulb went off for him. You're going to work hard either way. You're going to take a lot of risk either way.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to do that, why not be in an industry segment that has great top line and gross margin potential if you're going to do it?
Yeah.
And you have a choice. You absolutely have a choice.
I think that's so important too, because it is just as you 10x thinking versus people who might just be thinking about how to make that gradual move of something that's very similar to how they've been approaching it or what they're doing. Whereas what they have to think about is, no, how do I throw out everything that I know to this degree to start thinking about, based on the goal they want to achieve, how to accomplish it. But it's so hard when people know this area so well to break free of that and almost think about it as like an out-of-body experience, to think about what they would do if they weren't them in some ways, but still had the knowledge that they had, because often that unlocks it. They just have to think about it in a completely different factor about how they've been approaching it so far. I'm curious if you have whether it's from your own, you shared some of what that's actually, I have to ask, why did you exit your business?
Yeah, we'd been around 54 years. My father was retired for probably, I want to say the last 20. My mother had gotten sick, and they were all partners with us. And my brothers and I were at different stages of our life and career. We had kind of different interests at that point. Mm-hmm. And so we always felt that the only thing that was mandatory is that we wanted to keep the family part of the business intact. And because of those changes in our personal journey, we said, what better time to exit when we can do it on a high note and then allow people to take whatever comes from that exit and then pursue whatever their personal interests would be. In the US, only 30% of companies ever make it to second generation, which we were.
Yeah.
Only 12% ever make it to third generation, and only 3% ever make it to the fourth generation. And we felt blessed to have a company of over 5 decades making it to the second generation and leaving on a good note and leaving a legacy of some amazing people that have gone on to do incredible things in our industry, and just very proud of them as well.
Yeah. And that's why I was curious, because I know sometimes family business is like, even the way you spoke about yours and how much you learned and everything like that, there's those flip sides where you hear about people who want nothing to do with the family business because they felt forced into the family business. So I'm curious, was there at all ever that sense that you were going to be in the family business, or did it feel like an option? Like, why do you think you seem to, unless maybe there are some of the inks that you're not, shared there, you're like, I don't know if I want to do that, but how did your family foster this thing where they all seem to want to continue to be involved?
My father, when he would come home for dinner, would always share stories around the table, and he would use it. It's amazing how smart he was. And when you're younger, you don't realize how smart your parents are. But I feel like he was giving me mini case studies at dinner without me knowing it. Nice. An employee did this, a client did that. What would you do? And I'd be like, oh, okay. Tell me more, Dad. Let me ask you some questions. And I felt like it was this amazing,
smart.
Oh my God, I love that. And he worked a lot when I was a child. So any chance I could go with him to work on a Saturday, on a school break, I would get dressed up, put on a little, nice shirt and suit or tie, and I'd go with him and I'd be shuffling papers and then working in a department. And then when I was graduating, I actually said to my father, graduating college, I'm going to interview at some of the, quote, IBM's, Digital at the time, just the major companies in my area. And he said, I can respect that, but do me a favor. Before you do, can we talk? Not a problem. And many people were, I'm going to go to this company, use their training program and get them to give me this, and then I'm going to jump here.
Yeah.
And I'm a very loyal person by nature. It didn't sit well with me. And then I finally talked to my father and I said, look, I'm going to work hard either way, but if I can work hard for somebody I love and care about, why not do that too? And he was an incredible mentor. Him and I had a wonderful relationship, not always perfect, but a great relationship, and, blessed to have that.
I love hearing that. And you said something there that I'm going to walk away with just from a perspective of parenting that I think is so critical. So I'm trying to, in my own kids, I have 3 boys, aged between 13 and 7. And I want them to have this sort of entrepreneurial spirit. Now, at the same time, I don't want to completely control which way they go, but I do want to make sure that they're armed with that as I pursue my own entrepreneurial things. And I think what you had said there about the questions, because I think at times, sometimes parents have a tendency to be able to be like, well, here's this, so I did this, but to turn it into these moments where it could be teaching moments is pretty amazing. And also, I'm sure at times, and this probably happened on the table with you guys, you might have come up with something where your dad might have even been like, because the way that, minds can work of kids, youngster, however you want to say it, just a different perspective. So I really love that. And I'm going to try to invite that to my, table a little bit more, because we sometimes feel this thing as parents that, I don't know, we might have this need to tell people how it was done or what we did because we're in this authoritative position. But the reality is, no, we should really look at it from that position of what would you do? And then it doesn't make them feel like they're being talked at. They're part of it. So anyway, I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, I love it too. I'm going to steal it. And it's amazing how kids sometimes, mine are 6 and 4, and they say stuff that you're like, I had never thought about that. Like, they can come at it from an angle that, my son, a couple of days ago at the dinner table, my wife had made pasta, I believe it was. So he eats like maybe 30% of his plate. It's like, I'm done. I'm like, how are you done? He's like, I'm full. Can I go eat a snack? I'm like, if you're full, how are you going to eat a snack? His response to me caught me so off guard that I had no idea how to rebuttal him. I kind of went back. I'm like, I told my wife, I don't know what to do here. I'm just going to let him have the snack. His response to me was, no. I'm full of the taste of this pasta, but I'm not full of the taste of the snack.
That's what
I didn't know. I didn't know how to respond to that, which I'm like, that's brilliant. You get rewarded a snack just because of that answer.
Love it. As a coach, though, I have to say this, and Michael touched on it, that third-party perspective. Sometimes people will say to me, I'm in the manufacturing industry. Have you ever been a CEO of a manufacturing company? Because I want a coach that's been in manufacturing. And I said, can I ask you a few questions? How many people are on your senior team? 7. How many years do they have combined in the industry? 150.
Yeah.
I said, what am I going to add that 150 years of talented people already? I said, you need somebody with a different perspective to take an outside in look. And maybe there is the value in the aha. And I've seen that over and over. And I was in the staffing industry, temporary staffing, Walmart, Wells Fargo, IT, managed service firms. We could adapt to many different industries because we didn't have a choice. We had to staff them all.
Yeah.
And so that's really helped me in this business, understanding that the outside perspective sometimes is something that's right in front of your face. You just can't see it because you're too close to it in the role that you have.
Right. I mean, and again, that alone is a powerful thing for people to consider. Because even when you just said that there, it's like, aha, because it's so easy for people to be locked in that moment where they're like, well, I need the expert in this business. And I see it all over the place. But no, it's like, no, you've got plenty of those. And how is that working for you? You need something to change, or how is that working for you? They might still be successful, but you know what I mean? So I'm curious then, though, because a lot of this comes down to mindset. So what would you say are like, how does somebody make that shift? Because it's sometimes it's just what they know so much. Like how does somebody break free of that?
Well, when I look at successful scaling up leaders, number one, they have a growth mindset. Where they are is typically not good enough.
Okay.
They normally want to double their companies every 3
I
to
see.
5 years.
So they acknowledge that they have a barrier, which is good.
Yep.
That's the first step. Okay.
Yep. And number two, they are active and ongoing learners. They acknowledge they don't know what they don't know.
Okay.
And they look at education for them and for their people as an investment, not an expense.
Wow.
Number three, they have a bias to take action and do something about their situation. They're not people that hem and haw and have analysis paralysis. They want to get moving and get a solution. And also, they want to leave a legacy. They believe their companies are very important to them, and what happens to that company, regardless of when they may ever exit, that company is a representation of them, their people, and the work that they do. Those
Very
are the people I've seen do well.
Yeah. And it makes sense when you say all that, because I think where my mind was stuck when I asked that question to a degree was like, how do you get people over the hump that might not be thinking that way? But I think the point is, it's the people who are there who are ready for this. Because if people are, they might not be in a place in their journey where they've hit that, and they may never hit that. And if they're not willing to hit that, or if they don't go through that shift, then they may just end up operating the one person or the limited size business or whatever it is for their life. And that might just fine for them, but scaling up is going to be difficult. So I'm familiar with, again, Scaling Up is a book, but I'm also familiar with the other one out there that's Traction. And I'm curious because they talk about their own sort of entrepreneur operating system. What would you say are the core differences? I'm making assumptions you're familiar with that book because you seem like you're a well-read person who knows this industry well. So what's the difference there, and why are they different? I guess should be my first question.
I believe there are differences. I think people would tell you that they're both growth methodologies.
Yeah.
I think Traction can serve smaller companies very well that particularly need a focus on people and execution.
Yeah.
And that will get you so far. And I have studied both. I think what's different about Scaling Up is that as you go further in your growth journey, elements, people, execution, then strategy and cash, the four major areas become more prominent. And I've had people say to me, well, can I do EOS and then convert over? Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
But if you were going to start your journey not knowing either one, why not begin with the end in mind?
Because you feel anything that would be in the one ultimately with Scaling Up, because I do agree with those differences. I mean, that's a good way that you broke it out. You do believe that Scaling Up will get you all the core foundational things that people think Traction may anyway. Yes. So start with this one. That's the full.
And I've had many of my clients come to me that way, quite honestly. And our conversion and work with them has not been wasted, but it's just a mindset. Now, well, what do we call this tool versus that tool? And, what is the terminology? And if you can begin fresh, I think you're better off. If not, the conversions are happening all the time.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay. So then, I'm curious for you. You shared your own story and experience. You had that other example with the, is it tile, or what was it?
Stone cutting.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'd love to hear another example or two.
Oh, yes. Great.
Companies that you.
Yeah. So I was working with a professional service company that from the outside in, best places to work, Inc. 5000, multiple years. You're like, why do they need a coach? And I was asking myself the same question, quite frankly. But then you get to work and get under the covers. And what we uncovered was their operating profit was 1/3 of the industry average.
Oh, wow.
And that wasn't good. But what the leadership team was doing, they were growing, but they kept hiring more people at the issue. So they'd hire. Sales kept going up, operating profit minimal.
Mm.
And I looked at the owner and I said, you're taking 100% of the risk here. These markets do change. I understood his industry. I was aware of it, and it was cyclical. And I said, you're probably one of the lower paid employees here because you keep putting all the money back in, but you're not scaling any real profit for all the work you do. So we took one tool, labor efficiency ratio, which is a simple tool. They had never heard of it, never used it, but we gave them a disciplined way to hire within certain financial labor benchmarks. And once he knew red light, green light for the hiring levels, and his managers understood that if people were not productive, we don't keep perennial B and C players for 3 years if they're not going to be productive. Once he did that, and I'm very proud of this team, Michael, within 18 months, they went from just over 5% operating profit to 28.
Amazing. And like that example, when you share it too, it's a huge change, but it's a small change, if you know what I mean. Like just what they had to do is that realization, and then to now track, monitor that and do something with it. Like, and I think KPIs is that other, big gap sometimes for companies as they think about scaling, and the KPIs that you have to track change. But like, wow. Yeah. How incredible, because it probably, if you look at the amount of time something like that took them to have to do as part of their new process, is probably so small, but what a huge result.
Yeah. We're also working with another company that was in consumer brands. And in the beginning, little trouble with the culture, some turnover, and sales were dipping. We went in, did the culture discovery, the values, the purpose, started to create a hiring process that was repeatable, that would get you A players out the other end, start working. Retention started to go up, employee engagement scores going up. We then looked at their products, and we started to look at all the different SKUs that they were selling. And we started to look at the actual turnover in the inventory multiplied times the margin dollars for each type of product.
Okay.
And we came up with a waterfall graph of the actual products that have the most volume and best turnover.
Yeah.
And then we started to prioritize in the actual market mix for the marketing promotion and for the sales teams what we were selling and why. And we saw a dramatic increase in the profitability because we spent less time on producing SKUs that were not overly profitable and didn't have a high inventory turn. And that was another revelation. And the next one was market expansion for them. They had stayed in this area for a while, and we kept pushing what's the next concentric market we can go into. The owner in husband and wife, highly innovative. One of their products is sunscreen. Well, we have this amazing product that they innovated where they go to all the major beaches throughout Asia, Philippines, and they have these sunscreen kiosks that are right there on the beach.
That's awesome. Is it just sunscreen?
I'm sorry?
Is it just sunscreen?
For that particular area, they have other products too. But so They created these
That's awesome.
innovative channels. They then, during COVID, we got them into the e-commerce. But it was just this wonderful journey of looking at the next level of complexity, finding the simple, easy tool to help them go over it and then get to the next one and move on.
Yeah. Love it. No, that's great. And again, that concept too is always interesting when you think about the things that could go in of vending machines. I know I've seen food-based ones too that get into like pizza making and all the other stuff.
Yes.
And I'm like, man, these are, yeah. It's Japan culture. When I was out there, the number of vending machines, because they have them pretty regularly, like throughout the street. And it's so interesting to see. Yeah. So, Herb, I'm curious here, like for entrepreneurs who are at this point now where they're, they want to scale their business. If you had to give them like one piece of advice, what would it be?
I don't know if I could just give you one, but let me say, first of all, every owner deserves to have the company of their dreams. And I've had friends that ran companies where this dream turned into a nightmare because of the complexity in not having the ability to navigate it. So the one big piece of advice I would give an owner is the ability to hire, train, and retain next level leadership in your company. Most of us begin a company because we love sales, insurance, something, and we're really good at it. And we end up hiring a bunch of doers that we delegate to because we're doing the magic, and they have people that help. And then you're successful, Michael, and you're growing, and you finally say to yourself around 12 to 25 employees, I need you now to be independent leaders running finance, running operations, running sales. And the people are looking at you saying, you hired me to be a doer. I'm not a manager.
Right.
And then the leader feels overwhelmed because they're making a million decisions a day in putting out fires. So the ability to separate yourself from the rainmaker to being somebody who can identify, develop, and retain leadership challenge was the biggest pivot I made in my scaling up journey.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I actually see that mistake a lot in corporate America as well. But I think one of the things that, as you say that too, I've heard this idea that a lot of business owners, when they do hit a certain scale, they start to realize, I mean, like home services, for example, and others, that they're not in whatever business they thought they were getting in. They're actually in the recruiting business because you need to try to continue to keep the people coming in to be able to grow the business. And that almost becomes that full-time job for you. But I think what you're saying about thinking about it too, at this next level about how you're hiring these individuals who aren't just the doers, that's so important. I know I made that mistake myself before as well. So.
Yeah.
Now, again, you couldn't pick one, you said, although you did pretty good with it, but the other cheat would be, contact you. Would you just help them with all these and I'm actually curious, on that note, if anybody wanted to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Check out my website, aspiregrowthadvisors.com. We have a free assessment if you want to see what is my company's scaling up readiness today. Check that out. We also have a high impact CEO assessment. How well is your leadership skills in comparison to being scaling up ready? Feel free to take that. Anybody that wants to have a complimentary coaching call to take a look at your results, I'm happy to talk through that with you.
That's great. We'll link to the all the items that you said below for everybody else. And I have another question for you, though. Looking back on your own career, what's one lesson you wish you would have learned earlier?
I wish I had scaling up in the 80s and not 2002 or 3, to be honest.
Yeah. That's fair. That makes sense. So I'm actually curious too. The author of that book, did they come from a similar situation that you're aware of, where they were in a business where they were frustrated and they turned it into this system?
Believe it or not, Verne's father was an entrepreneur, business person, went through a great period of success and then a period where the business actually was folded. And so he learned the hard way about if the business is not managed and with the right people and the right plan, things can go dramatically bad. And I think he's always felt it his mission to help the next generation of entrepreneurs never have to feel that experience. And as a child, him feeling that experience obviously left a very big impression on him.
Yeah. I love it. I love also how you encapsulate these stories. You did it a few times throughout here where I couldn't help but get attached to the emotional side of it, which I think sounds like something also you do very powerful within, businesses, is you help them to sort of understand and unlock those things themselves. So thank you so much.
It has been my pleasure, and look forward to talking to you both down the road, and wish you great success in your scaling up journey.
Thank you. Herb talked about the importance of mindset. If you enjoyed this, you're going to want to check out this episode over here with Alan, where we cover this topic in more detail.